Okay, well, first of all, let me welcome everybody that is here. I am so happy to see all of you. Um, I um, I hope that you will glean from this information meeting that we're going to have, that any questions that you have will be answered. And then even at the end, we're going to have options to where you can um, contact people or other resources that we'll have that you could that will help you if you want to research further down um, regarding any kind of curriculums, programs, anybody, just to have support and encouragement from anybody else. So we'll offer that at the end as well. But before we get started, I want you to meet our hostesses. I'll go ahead and begin, and then we'll just tell a little bit about each other and about ourselves and our families, and then we'll start answering some questions. So my name is Kim Lee. I am a homeschool mom. I've been homeschooling for about 6 years. I was a teacher in the public school system before. I taught for about 12 years. And then we basically got to a point where we felt like our oldest girls were in elementary school, and we just kind of felt like we weren't getting to spend the time with them that we wanted to. And I had just had our son, and it made me realize just how quickly time goes by. So we made a decision for me to stay home and homeschool, and it's been great. It's had its challenges, obviously, but we have thoroughly enjoyed it and would not change it for anything. We are part of Classical Conversations, and I am the director of the North Augusta community for next year. And we have really enjoyed that. That's worked for our family. And so we have 4 children, 2 girls, 17 and 15, and 2 boys, 7 and 1. And so my husband's name is Chuck, and we are just enjoying this journey, and we love coming beside people and doing life together with them. So who wants to go next? All right, Emily, why don't you go next?
Sure. Well, my name is Emily Tran, and we have been homeschooling as well for about 6 years. We have 4 children. They are 13, 10, 8, and 4. And we have kind of done a variety of different curricula. We've got, as I'm sure all of y'all would say the same thing, all of your kids are different, so they kind of need different things. So we've kind of done an eclectic style homeschooling. Let's see, we are part of an enrichment co-op, and we've done that for probably 5 of the 6 years that we've homeschooled, and we love that. And I would just echo what Kim has said about homeschooling. It really has been an amazing journey. It's not easy, but just being able to be there for all, the milestones and reach those together has just been a real blessing. And so we're really just thankful to be able to have that opportunity with our kids.
I can go next.
All right, thank you, Kim.
Carol, it's Carol. It's okay.
I saw Kim's mouth moving. All right, thanks, Carol.
Whoever you are. My name is Carol Bond. I am one of the administrators at the Homeschooling in Aiken Facebook page. I actually have not been a homeschooler for very long. We have 4 children, all daughters, 20. How old are these kids? 20, almost 26. She'll be 26 in a couple of days. 25, 23, and 7. So we had a little bit of a surprise. And in the surprise, we decided that we wanted to homeschool. My older daughters were not homeschooled. They went to public school. But we were older, and we as parents were older, and decided we didn't want to miss out on anything. And so we had many reasons why. We thought it was really important to know what those are, because I figured it was not going to be an easy journey. And I started out traditional homeschool for preschool. I put that in quotes because I don't think it's necessary. But we did a homeschool for preschool, and then I did virtual school for a year and a half. We loved it the first year, not so much the second year, and we switched back to traditional homeschool and have been doing that since. My husband, I was very fortunate. I know other families, the husbands sometimes are not on board, but mine was completely on board with it. In fact, came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about homeschooling?" So yeah, we've had a great time doing it. We've used two different curriculums so far, and I'm not involved in any co-ops as of yet, or anything like that, because I am an introvert and like to be alone. But we do park days and we do lots of other things too.
That's great. Thank you, Carol. Okay, Kim, you want to go?
Okay. So my name is Kim Andersack, and I homeschooled my oldest two all the way through. The oldest is 26 and the next one is 24. And the baby is 22. She homeschooled till 3rd grade, and then we put her into public school, and she ended up graduating from public school. Our story is a little bit different because my husband is also a public school teacher. So we're kind of diversified that way. But once my kids graduated from homeschooling, I continued to stay active in the homeschool community, and in South Carolina, you have to join an accountability association that helps with your record keeping, and I'm a director of one of those kinds of associations. I also have a blog that is just a free resource hub for all South Carolina homeschoolers, but really it's beyond South Carolina too. But it gives you really specifically how to get started homeschooling in South Carolina. But I have people that follow me from everywhere that are like, it's relevant no matter where you are. So anyway, what do you do with, a zillion years of homeschool experience, when where do old homeschoolers go? This one started a blog, so.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Kim. All right, and Julie.
Yeah. My name's Julie Armstrong. I'm been homeschooling my oldest is 14. He's not in homeschool anymore, but I started with him. So going that far back. So he's finishing up 8th grade right now. So that's how long I've been homeschooling. We actually started, well, I wanted to homeschool. It was a dream of mine from when I was in college. I had met a family that was all homeschooled all the way up through, and I thought they were brilliant, and I just really admired the kind of family time that they had, the closeness they had. And I grew up with a culture where the idea of homeschooling was kind of questionable. Like, are you really, this is what you do when you can't do anything else. You've been kicked out of public school, or you can't go to, and so it was just really refreshing to me. So I came into marriage knowing that's what I wanted to do. My husband, not 100% on board, but he's like, well, you want to do it, go for it. That's kind of his take on it. And he helps out where he can. Anyhow, I've got 4 children. My oldest is 14. I have tomorrow will be 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And so the 3 girls are who I'm homeschooling now currently, and we started out using the virtual online school, and it, like Carol said, it was great when I had 1 student. 2 students got a little bit more challenging because the requirements were that I was spending teaching time 6 hours with each child. So a 12-hour day for 2 children was a little crazy. And then they started taking more and more of my freedom to do things the way I wanted to do away. And when the 3rd child was coming up to start school, I was like, there is no way that I can juggle 3 of them. So we pulled out from the online school and just started doing, a friend of mine was doing Sunlight curriculum, and she talked to me, and I know that's one of the things we'll probably talk about is like, how do you choose a curriculum later? But for me, it was really important to be able to talk to somebody face to face, put my hands on the material, her show me what she does, that sort of thing. And that's my learning style. It really helped me. And she really was able to give me confidence that I could do this. And that it wasn't rocket science. I didn't have to, you know, be a super organized person with a teaching certificate and all this to be able to do this. So yeah, it's what we've been pretty much using Sunlight all the way, because I am a creature of habit. I find something I like and I stick to it. And that's where we are. So.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was great. Okay, now that you have met all of your hostesses, we are going to go ahead and begin with answering the questions. Some of these questions were presented to those of you that registered for the class, and so we're going to try to answer those the best we can. And then we also have some general questions that many homeschoolers, even ourselves, asked over the years, and so just in case it would be helpful, we wanted to go ahead and answer those as well. So let's go ahead and start off. I kind of felt like we needed to start kind of from the very beginning. So let me share the screen. I can do that. Okay. So question number 1, if my child is still enrolled in public school or private school, how do I transition? And by that, I just mean, you know, what do we need to do from there? A lot of this is going to depend on the state you are in, but for Georgia, it's pretty simple, and I'll let somebody touch on it that's in South Carolina. In Georgia, you just go to the school, or if you need to, especially with the way things are right now, the Board of Education, you can call them. But for us, we just simply just formally withdrew our child from school, our children from school, and then I just had the records and stuff like that and kept those. And then I went on to the Georgia Board of Education website, and then I just filled out a letter of intent, and it's all online. You just follow the directions and print it out and just keep it for your records. So as far as transitioning from coming out of public school or private school into homeschooling, in Georgia, that's at least what you do. So it's pretty simple, but you really just need to find out from the school where your children are, and that would be like the first step you need to do. I know with Georgia, you have to do it within 30 days of withdrawing, or if you carry out the rest of the school year, you have to do it, I think, before September 1st of the next school year. How about South Carolina? Anybody want to answer for that?
I can. In South Carolina, if your child is in the school, then you have a form to fill out at the school office that basically gives them permission to send the records to the next school. But when you're registered in South Carolina, the parent is the record keeper, and you have to register with an accountability association that says that you don't register directly with the Department of Ed. The associations register with the Department of Ed, so your contact information is kept, you know, away from the Department of Ed. Then you're just registered with an accountability association, and the association can send a letter, that can issue you a letter that says that you're enrolled now. And so when I issue a letter, it says that the parent is responsible for the record keeping, and then they signed a form that says that they gave their permission to send it to the next school. So a lot of times I get the records from the school because we speak office to office that way for them. But it's really all the school records belong back to the parent. So it's a pretty easy transition process. Just a little different of who do you register with directly as a private entity, that rather than the Department of Ed.
Yeah, and any state is going to have, if you look up under the education part of the state website, it'll give you detailed instructions on what to do, and then the school where your child is enrolled in should have that information as well. All right, anybody else want to add to it? Okay. All right, question number 2. Okay, how many hours should I be teaching my children? Anybody like to comment on that?
I'll jump in on that one. From a Georgia standpoint, they require us to do 4.5 hours per day. And that's generally what we do. Now, my older kids will have work that they do on their own later in the afternoon, but we'll do 4.5 hours in the morning as a group. Well, there is some individual working then as well, but we can get our work done in that amount of time with the older kids having individual work later in the day. So that's what we follow.
And I think with that, again, it's going to depend on your state, what they suggest and what they require. As far as record keeping and things like that, we'll answer a question to show kind of like how do you document that. But also, that also depends on, what that looks like. 4 hours for one person, it may look one way versus 4 hours for another person. And that's where you are working with your learning style, your children's learning style. It does not have to be 4 hours of worksheets. It doesn't have to be 4 hours of lecture. It could be, doing science outside, taking nature walks, anything that is learning, but it does not have to look one specific way. And that's one of the joys and freedoms of homeschooling, is that you can be creative. You can, use it to your child's learning style and interest, and be able to format your schooling in that direction. Anybody else? Okay. I have you muted, so if you have it, I can't see everybody since I'm sharing the screen. So just unmute yourself and jump in if y'all want to answer. Okay, and that's question number 3. How do I find out what style of learning, teaching, or teaching do I or my child prefer?
Can I answer that? A friend of mine who was also a public school teacher, but became a homeschool mom when her daughters were ready to go to school. She gave me advice on this when I was asking her, how do I start? What do I do first? And she suggested that the first thing I should do is look up the different styles of homeschooling. And I had no idea how many styles there were, but there's a lot. And the reason I wanted to answer this question is because what I did, my go-to is to look for books. That's what I do. So 2 of the books that I found, we can probably add this to the email later, Kim, but 2 of the books I found, I went and looked them back up just to make sure. One of them was called Homeschooling Methods by Paul Suarez, and the other was one of the everything series of books. It's everything about, baking, everything about, well, this one is the Everything Homeschooler book. And both of those were very helpful. The Everything Homeschooler book is by Sherry Listenback. But they were really helpful. And what I found was that I was much more of a, apparently it's very common too, when you're looking up all these different styles, you'll see some that your teaching style, that they'll automatically appeal to you. And now I started with a very young child, but if your child is older, you can also look at it from the point of view of you know your child. You know your child better than anybody else. So you'll be able to see kind of which one of these your child would also appeal to, you know. So look at those different styles, see which ones they are, find explanations about them. Of course, you can check online, you can check out the library, your local library. There's plenty of books about this. The two I named are just two I picked up, but there's lots of available. And find out which ones. Probably you're going to be a combination of a couple or more. For instance, when I was looking it up, there were some things about the classical style that I really enjoyed, or I thought, wow, that sounds great. That sounds wonderful. But I also really thought that unschooling sounded awesome. You know, and it really appealed to me, the idea of just diving into a subject that my daughter could decide today she wanted to learn about pirates, and we would spend however long just completely diving into that subject. And so those things really appealed to me. Now, if you're starting with a very young child, obviously you're going to have to, at some point, kind of look at how your child learns. And so you also need to look at the learning styles to see how you can implement any of those homeschool styles into your child's learning style. I would advise the same way. Check out some books on it. Look it up online. You can talk to other seasoned homeschoolers as well about what they do, but your child's going to be completely different, as are you. So what appeals to you may not appeal to me at all, and vice versa. You may think, I wouldn't consider myself an unschooler at all, because I need more structure than that. But I have friends who are complete unschoolers. They are just, it seems like they're seated, you know, flying by the seat of their pants, but they have a method to their madness. And, you know, their kids are clearly learning. They can carry on these conversations about anatomy, and they're 8. You know, it's amazing. So, you know, don't get set into that you have to be a certain style or that there's only one way to do it. Just find out about the different styles and different learning styles and different homeschooling styles, and see which ones appeal to you.
I'd like to add something to that too. I was just thinking, like, along with what Carol was saying, that I need the structure. Like the one that I picked gives me a plan for the whole, you know, for the whole year, day by day, of what to do to get through the curriculum. But the way I see it is, like, I feel a sense of security when I have a recipe, when I have some instructions, but then once I feel comfortable with it, then I can go off the plan. I can add something here or there to make it fit. And there's not, we're learning, we're doing things educational. So there's not like, you know, there's somebody going to come and say, oh, you didn't finish everything on this curriculum. Shame on you. So that freedom to say, you know what, today I see my kids have an interest. We're talking about astronomy. And so we're going to get online and we're going to look at things. And, you know, I started with a basic curriculum that led us into talking about astronomy, but we went off curriculum instead of just reading through the book and doing all the exercises to research it and find out more about it. That's kind of been like the response to a lot of things, because as a mom and as a homeschool mom, I can, you know, I'm not going to lie to my kids and say, they ask a question, I don't know the answer. I don't know. Let's look it up. And so that's just kind of the way we approach family life in general. It just kind of blends into that's we're always learning.
Yeah, I also think on the learning approach, you know, look up the different methods and philosophies of education, because it could be, you know, you could have, like you were saying, unschooling, Charlotte Mason, classical method. You know, there's different types of those too, not to be overwhelming, because a lot of them can kind of overlap, but just something else out there that might appeal to you that you didn't know about. Kim, did you have something you wanted to mention too, even with your blog, on maybe something that could help?
Yeah, I have some resources about picking your style and kind of sorting things out by that. I think it also helps to know what your why is, why you're doing this, so that you can sort of sort curriculum out based on what you're aiming at. If you're aiming at really academic excellence, there are certain curriculums that you might want to choose for that. If you're aiming to just let the child learn and explore, then you're going to lean towards a more eclectic or unschool Waldorf kind of style that is more relaxed. So those are the kinds of things too, when you know what am I trying to do here? You know, is this kid all stressed out from so much, you know, work and being driven in the situation where they are, or, you know, do they need to be pushed some more? That kind of thing. So, but yeah, I'll put some more links, articles that help you kind of sort out what your style is.
And I think the biggest thing to take away is to not feel like you have to pick a style of learning or teaching or anything like that before you get started. I mean, I think if any of us were asked, you know, did you know everything that you needed to know before you started? I don't think any one of us could raise our hands, you know, because it's a journey. And so it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. That's what I was always told, and it's really true. It's just doing this with your children and just enjoying it. And so whichever way you do it, I think that's the biggest thing. But so yeah, just, you know, just take it one step at a time. And, you know, if you try something out and that's not the fit, then you've learned something. And then, you know, try something else. Okay, let's see. Thank y'all for that. Right, next one. What do I need for record keeping? Is there somewhere I can go online to find out what my state requires? Anybody?
Well, I can speak a little bit about what South Carolina requires. You're supposed to cover 180 days. You're supposed to cover a basic, they say 5 subjects, but reading and writing kind of fall under like your English language arts. So some people count those together as one subject. And then math, science, and social studies. Of course, you can add on any other subjects that you want, but that's the minimum that we're required to do. So you may have, you know, math, you know, music, art, foreign languages, Bible, whatever you want to add in there. Those kinds of things. And then you keep a daily lesson plan of what you're accomplishing, and keep some samples of their work. And then periodically, semi-annually, you write a little report to yourself about what's working and what's not. Doesn't necessarily have to be a report card that says in math they're making an A, in reading they're making a B, because I mean, who are you telling that to? What does that mean to you? Where you might write it more in an objective format, and then write new goals of what you want to accomplish so that you know what you're kind of aiming for, that kind of thing. And I say, you know, South Carolina's laws are kind of specific that way, but they're also very common sense, the way that, you know, the law also says to buckle up your seatbelts. But, you know, when I'm getting in the car, there's a beeping noise that reminds me to buckle up my seatbelt, and I do it. And so that's what I consider kind of our accountability associations, is that little noise that's just going to remind you, hey, are you doing your record keeping? And most of them have just a checklist that says, yep, I'm doing it. Some of them have you turn in some things, but for the most part, it's essentially just somebody that's there to remind you and advocate with you and say, are you doing your reports? And I think that it's kind of common sense. So even if you live in a state where the law doesn't say that you might want to cover some basic subjects, you might want to cover a certain amount of days and keep some daily lesson plans, because, you know, things change incrementally. And you like, everything seems to stay the same day to day to day to day. And when you look back over time, then things seem different. And so you know, keeping those day-to-day things, you might not have picked up what is actually changing when you kind of look back over them and then go, oh my gosh, I remember when they were, you know, forgetting to put the ed on the end of a past tense word. It was just always a d, and look, I forgot that I was arguing with them about that. I thought I'd turn blue in the face before they remembered to do that. And now you're on to something else that you're struggling with. You can get like tunnel vision on what you're struggling with at the moment. So for the most part, the record keeping, I say, is for your own benefit. And so why would you cheat yourself on those kinds of things? You know, like, it's what you're trying to do for yourself. So yeah, the law says to do this, but I think, again, finding your why and knowing why you're doing it makes a lot more sense to me. So.
Okay, thank you. I know for Georgia, I actually looked it up to make sure I knew exactly. Georgia, you have to, other than, you know, turning in your letter of intent, there's nothing else required to turn into the state. We don't have associations or anything like that you have to be a part of, which is, it can be a good thing, but it also can be dangerous in a way, because, you know, you're held accountable only to yourself in that sense. So legally, you know, according to what Georgia requires. But they do expect you to do the 4.5 hours a day, 180 school days, but you do not have to, you're not required to keep attendance. However, I have found, just like what Kim was saying, it's so beneficial to have attendance, because you can go back and look, and you can go, okay, we're here, but we've been doing school this long, you know, how is that for our goals? How are we doing with this? How can I look at what I have done based on my records and looking forward, you know? But as far as the declaration of intent, the instructor shall write an annual progress assessment report in each required subject area for each student. These reports shall be retained for at least 3 years. So they're not to be turned in, they're just for your records, just in case. So that is all that Georgia requires. So, you know, as far as lawfully, but again, just like Kim said, it's always good to just have some kind of documentation, you know, pieces of work, things like that, not just for, you know, record keeping, but even for, I mean, you know, for sentimental purposes and things like that. So you can go back and look and say, oh man, I remember those days. So anything else anybody else wants to touch base on or with this?
I just wanted to point out that if you go to HSLDA, which is the Homeschool Law Defense Association, I think. If you go there, they actually have a place where you can find your state, and they have the laws. Now, I would double check before you just trust this. I would double check whatever you find out there through your school, so your not association, your school boards and etc. Some places I have heard the school boards are not terribly helpful, but they should be. You should be able to find out what the law states. So I just wanted to point out that you could look that up. And no matter where you are, it does show all 50 states as well.
That's great, thank you. Okay.
I was going to ask a question. I don't think that we have that we did a slide for this, but it falls under requirements here. Doesn't Georgia require you do some standardized testing?
Oh yes, you're right. They do. Georgia requires you, starting in your 3rd grade year, to do, again, you don't have to turn the records into your scores into the state, but they do require you to keep them on hand. But you have to do it your 3rd grade year, and then every 3 years after that. So, you know, I have actually, I was helped with the testing and everything in this area for the last couple of years. And something that I learned from some parents who had children graduating and going to take the SAT, one of the things that they told me that what they learned from is that it wasn't so much of the scores on the test, but practicing the skill of the test, and that if they had to do it over again, they would have tested their children more than just the every 3 years, or just for what was required in high school, simply because it helped them. I mean, I don't even think they showed the children, their kids, the scores, but it was just something to think about, just teaching them the skill of that kind of test taking, so that when it is time for it to count, it's not completely new to them. So, anybody else? Okay, all right, let's move on to the next one. Our next two slides kind of go hand in hand. So there is an overwhelming amount of curriculums out there. What is the best way to find the best fit? And then Kim posted this, because this is great. How to find the perfect homeschool curriculum. Number 1, research online for 3 hours. Number 2, cry. Then 3, buy the first curriculum you saw 3 hours ago. So, and if you have been in this situation, that is when it's funny, true funny. But just something that it can be overwhelming. And Emily I think Emily, you wanted to speak on this, didn't you?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So there's a few things that I would suggest thinking about. And one of those is your education or teaching philosophy, which Carol talked about earlier. So I think if you know what that is, that will help. And I would say too that can vary by subject, that you're not necessarily going to have the same philosophy through each subject. And then also consider what kind of learners your children are. And I think that was touched on as well. But don't just think learning modalities like, are they audio visual learners, but the actual styles that they have. So, do they need songs to memorize things? Do they need to understand the logic behind things? Do they prefer worksheets? Do they prefer working, in a group on projects? Those kinds of things. Really understanding what your child's style is. And then also consider what aspects of teaching are important to you. So do you prefer carefully laid out lesson plans, or do you want more freedom in how you approach things? How much time do you want to devote to teaching, or can you devote to teaching? Do you want to teach multiple children together for the same subject or not? Those kinds of different things. Then take those things and incorporate them all together. And I recommend, and this is another book. If you maybe we can put this on the end email or whatever, Kim. I'm gonna lift this up. I don't know if you can see it. This is Kathy Duffy's 100, and I think now it's 102 top picks for homeschool curriculum. I love this book. A friend had recommended this to me when I first started homeschooling, and it took the, crazy, oh my goodness, where in the world do I begin aspect out of things for me. Because what it does is it takes all those different things, your education philosophy, the types of learners your children are, and then how you want to teach, or what your philosophy is on education, and it rates those for each curriculum, and for each subject. And so you may end up having, if you have 3 kids, you may end up having 3 different math curricula, which we do, but at the same time, it'll also look at, your teaching style, your learning style. It rates each one of them. And then also, it'll tell you, if this particular curriculum works for multiple kids at multiple levels. So, you may have a 1st grader, a 3rd grader, and a 5th grader. Can you do this curriculum, this science curriculum for all 3 of them? Would that work for you? So it'll answer all those kinds of questions, and it'll rate them all. And so I found that book to be very, very helpful, and just a wonderful starting place for finding curriculum. And so once you become more familiar with the different curricula that are out there, you can always ask friends, other veteran homeschool moms that are, in co-ops and, at park days, wherever you end up seeing other homeschool families. And I would say particularly so if you have, special learning situations like, dyslexia, dysgraphia and stuff. It's always good to hear from people and talk to them personally if you can do that. I'd also recommend going to used curriculum sales or used curriculum bookstores so that you can actually see it and flip through it, decide if that's something that would work for you. And I think Kim mentioned also, don't be afraid to abandon something if it doesn't work for you. There's no point in tears and frustration for an entire year if you know from the beginning it's not going to work. We've had to do that a few times, and it really just makes everybody happier when you find something that works for your child. And then the other recommendation that I have as far as looking for curriculum that was recommended to me when we first started homeschooling is it's called rainbowresource.com. They're a wonderful site that carries most curriculum, not all, but they have great prices. A lot of times they're less than retail, sometimes less than you can even get them from the publishers themselves. They have very helpful reviews. Reviews are a great way, to look up different curricula. And Kathy Duffy, the author of the book, she also does reviews for curricula, and you can just Google that, and she'll have, if you have a question about, say, do I want to use Apologia Science? Do I want to use Abeka Science or whatever? You can look up those different curricula on her reviews and get an idea of what she has to say about it. And I found that to be very helpful.
Thank you, Emily. That was really good. Anybody else have anything they want to add? I really like Kathy Duffy. She's helped me with choosing different curriculums too. I've enjoyed her reviews. Okay, the next one. How do we find associations, co-ops, and communities? Now, I'll talk about co-ops and communities. And I think, Kim, you are going to address associations. Do you want to go ahead and do that? Talk about the associations and what that means?
Okay, so in South Carolina, we have accountability associations, and each year they have to file paperwork with the Department of Ed. So the Department of Ed has a list of all of them. But on my blog, I also maintain a list because I include a little bit more detail than just their contact information. I've gone through their websites and compared prices and what their record keeping deadlines are and any extra services they offer and things like that. So you can kind of compare and contrast that way. But they're registered with the Department of Education. You can go right to the Department of Ed website and find an accountability association that way.
And so if there are other states that have accountability associations that you need to join, more than likely they'll be on the state website, right?
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, and Georgia doesn't, but there probably is there may be other states that follow that same procedure. Okay, and regarding co-ops and communities, co-ops and communities, especially for those states that don't have accountability associations, they are a good way to help hold yourself accountable. We did our first year of homeschooling, we did Abeka, and it's a great curriculum, but it just wasn't for us. And I did not like homeschooling on our own. I needed mama's support and encouragement and socialization with other mamas, and my kids needed it too. And I wanted a little more accountability. And that was another reason we joined Classical Conversations. The difference that I have found with my knowledge of co-ops and communities, both of them meet on a weekly basis. Co-ops with co-ops, they are a group of homeschooling families that come together. They'll meet weekly or a set amount of time throughout the year. But one thing that they do is the parents, the mamas or the dads, will choose to teach a subject, whatever they want or are comfortable with, and then they'll teach that subject. So it may change from year to year. So one of the good things about that is that if you're looking for an elective that you want to, or a subject that you may not feel comfortable with teaching, but you want, you would like to be part, your children to be part of that class, you can join and enroll your children in the co-op, and it's a great way of community to be able to be with other homeschool families and such. But the curriculum can change from year to year. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. With communities, and by communities, it's other organizations that will meet on a regular basis, but they have a set curriculum. Classical Conversations, they've been around for 20 years, and they have a set curriculum that's from preschool all the way to 12th grade. So the thing with that, even though they meet weekly and once a week, and the other times you're homeschooling at home, just like it with a co-op, yet their curriculum is going to stay the same from year to year to year. Thrivent Academy is another one in the CSRA that they meet. They have, their teachers are actually certified teachers, but you meet so many days a week, and then you homeschool the other days. But their curriculum is the same. It's pretty much, you know what you're going to be doing, from year to year. I think there are a couple other communities in this CSRA like that too. But as far as finding out, I would think the best way, the easiest way, is on a social media platform. That is, any homeschool group you want to join, or just ask people. People are always, especially homeschooling parents and families, are always willing to share what they know, and so just asking on any homeschool social media platform would probably be the easiest way for the co-ops and communities in your area. Does anybody want to add to that?
I would just add that that's how I found out about our enrichment co-op that we're involved in, is through, it was either the Evans or the Augusta homeschool Facebook group. So.
All right. Okay, let's go on to the next question. All right, what is the difference between homeschooling and virtual schooling? Anybody want to answer that?
I can say something about that. For virtual school, at least the public school option, it's actually, you are a part of the public school system in your county, and there are actual teachers who are keeping track of records. They are doing some online teaching of your children, and especially in the younger grades, as a parent, you really are doing a lot of the teaching, and they are doing more of the record keeping for you. And I liked that. It felt like homeschooling without the scariness of trying to keep track of all of the records and getting my feet wet in doing this. As it goes on, it's more, they are doing more of the teaching, and your child is, in theory, should be doing more their homeschool part on their own. And whereas when you're homeschooling, you are the teacher. In South Carolina, we have the accountability associations that we report to, but you choose the curriculum, you're keeping track of attendance, what you're covering, all that kind of stuff. So the record keeping falls on you, and you report to the association. That's, it has its pros and cons. I say I prefer, at least at this point, the traditional homeschooling, because I have the freedom, I have the liberty to do what I want to do. I'm not trying to figure out what somebody else wants me to do, and for 4 different children. So it makes it a little simpler, but that's my understanding of the difference between the two.
Anybody else want to add?
Well, I mean, for the way it feels though, you're at home. So a lot of people, when they're on a virtual charter school, they do feel like they're homeschooling, and they are looking to make connections with homeschool groups too, so that they can get some of that social interaction. Some programs are better at having those kinds of field trips and connections and things for their online students, and some aren't as good at it. So it just is it can be important distinction for homeschool communities who will sometimes just say you have to be actually homeschooling. You can't have virtual. There's some lines that get crossed there that some people still want to hold. So you just have to be aware of that if you're looking for a homeschool group or support community of some kind, if they don't allow virtual school students because they're really public school students. So it's just, it feels the same, and so some communities are welcome that, and some don't. So.
All right, thank you, Kim. Thank you, Julie. All right, our next question, pretty popular one. What about socialization? Carol, I think you were gonna touch on this.
Yeah, it's everybody's favorite question. So the thing about socialization, there's a few things that you need to consider about that. One, the idea that public school students are really being quote unquote socialized isn't completely the case. They're not. If you remember from your public school days, I was in public school all the way up, and I was a talker, and I was told multiple times by multiple teachers that I was not there to socialize. So really, they're not there to socialize. And your children, while they are in school, quote unquote, they're not socializing either. But there are lots of other ways that you are going to have your children socializing, not just with other kids, but with adults as well. You know, something that struck me a long time ago, long before I was a homeschool mom, was the fact that homeschool kids that I had met, of course, some public school kids as well, but a lot of homeschool kids I met, they could have conversations with adults. They knew how to interact with an adult in an appropriate way, I mean, but they knew how to interact because they'd been taught not just how to socialize with their friends between, you know, locker visits and at lunch, but also they had been around multiple ages, multiple kinds of people, from field trips, from interactions of all kinds. And for homeschool students as well, you're really, I know for me, we're really in school all the time. There's not really a time where we are not in school, because I'm going to use every opportunity that arises as a way to teach my children. And so anywhere we go, not only is she in school, but she's also socializing with all these different people. I'm using that opportunity to teach her that. And then as far as them having friends, I know that's a question that we get a lot too. I've heard a lot where people, how are they going to make friends? Well, that's where your communities and your co-ops and your extracurricular activities are going to come in. If you're a member of a church, well, they're probably going to make friends through church. If you're in a neighborhood, well, they're probably going to have friends in the neighbors. If they go to art class, if they go to music class, if they play sports, all of those things are they're going to build friendships there. That's where they're going to socialize. Then a lot of communities and co-ops also offer things like, I know Classical Conversations offers a field day every year which is amazing. I'm not even in classical conversations. We've gone the last 3 years and my daughter's loved it, you know, and she's met friends. That she's had friends that she's, you know, where she's gotten to play at that event with them. At Homeschooling in Aiken, we try to offer a few different park days as well, so that moms can interact with each other, just like Kim was talking about earlier. And also the kids can play. The kids, we can just turn them loose. It's great. Go play. We're going to talk over here. And so you can meet up with all kinds of different people that share your philosophies on why you're homeschooling, learn various things. Maybe you didn't understand what classical conversations was. Honestly, I had no idea what that was until we were socializing with some other homeschoolers. So there's lots of ways that you're gonna socialize your kids. If you're transitioning them from public school into homeschool, they're gonna have friends, and you might just have to make an effort, you know, to let them still have play dates or whatever with their friends from school. But it's still not impossible, especially in this day and age now, as we all know, with all this pandemic going on. There's lots of ways that we're still keeping in contact with each other. Kids can do that too. So it's really not something to worry about. And in addition to that, I know Kim on her blog, she's had many posts, I believe, that dealt with what it really there's even another blog, Kim, sorry. I was talking about yours, now I'm going to another one. Weird Unsocialized Homeschoolers, which is hilarious and very informative. You know, but Kim has on her blog, she's talked about socialization and how it's really not as big of a deal as people like to make it out. We don't go to public school for socialization. We go there for an education. You go to other places to be social, you know. So I know that's something that I've heard other people when they're the main reason why I wanted to talk about this is because usually it's not so much the parents themselves that are worried about it. It's usually the people outside of your house that are saying, well, what about socialization? So you have a look at those blog posts, be prepared. You're going to get that question and you're going to start rolling your eyes every time you do. But it's really not going to be a big deal. I promise. Scouts, sports, all sorts of things, your kids will definitely have a way to plug in. And so will you too, as a homeschool mom.
Thank you so much, Carol. That's great. Yeah, a lot of insight. And okay, so piggybacking on that question, here's the next one. My child is very athletic. Are there opportunities for homeschoolers to be involved in sports or other extracurricular activities? And Carol, can you expound on that, as well as any activities, any groups, at least in the CSRA, but also what South Carolina does?
Yes. So for sports, there is a group called Eagle Sports that is in Aiken. Now, I know outside of, I want to say Aiken County, I think you can join. My child's not in sports for the true, you know, making sure that I'm showing all the things here. My kid's not in any sports. I do have friends that are, and so I know that you can join in Eagle Sports, and they do a lot of things. There's also church leagues that you can join, and of course there's city leagues that you can join. In addition, in South Carolina, you can request to join in on the public school. I'm not 100%, to be honest, I'm not certain how that works. I do know it works though, because I have a cousin whose son plays football, or did till he got too old, for East Aiken Elementary School. He's been homeschooled for years now. So it is possible. You can check with your school district again about how that is, or your association. And the other, as far as other opportunities for kids, I I briefly mentioned art class, music class. All of those things are available for homeschoolers as well. I know that there are several art classes available in Aiken. I'm sure there are in Augusta. If someone wants to mention who they are. But there's several that are available in Aiken in different forms. So there's painting, there's one that does all kinds of art. So you can look into that. They're varying price ranges as well. There's also a homeschool band. So there's, you know, even if your child was involved in band at school, they can still do that. You can check out different music classes. There's a 4-H that at Homeschooling in Aiken. There's a couple of people that talk about 4-H a lot. There's other things that kids can get involved in.
Civil Air Patrol,
Civil Air Patrol, exactly.
Sea Cadets, they have private clubs that you can join like that too, as well as trying to get in through the public school and joining the ROTC.
You can also check into organizations like DAR or Sons SAR, I guess would be Daughters of the Revolution, Sons of the Revolution. They have a children's one that kids can join. There's a way to go in on that, of course, but they of course learn about history, and they do a lot of volunteer work. And actually, that's another thing. I know when my oldest daughter was going through high school, she had to have volunteer hours. I've already started the idea of volunteering with my youngest daughter, and there's lots of opportunities for that too. In fact, I almost want to say there's a few more because our schedule is a lot more flexible. So anything that you do with public school, you can find a way to do with homeschool as well.
I just add that we actually are involved in the band program at our local middle school. And my daughter has never attended the public school system, but all you do is you have to go and actually register her for school. I just spoke with the principal and just, explained, I know in South Carolina, we are supposed to be able to take part in public school extracurricular activities. What do I need to do? They said, okay, you're just going to get online and you're going to register just like everybody else. And just they know because I went and spoke to them, when my registration comes through, that my daughter is only taking band class. And so we do that.
Yeah, there's also, I know there's a foreign language club for middle school and high schoolers in the Augusta area. There's HEA, Emily, is that the Home Educators Association? Is that what it stands for?
Yes, the CSRA Home Educators Association.
Yeah, and that's just, so that's CSRA. I mean, that's Georgia and South Carolina. I know they offer a graduation. They offer prom, other formal dances, things like that, field trips. Some of these organizations, they do charge a small fee, but again, why do you homeschool? Is it worth it? For a lot of people it is. So it's an easy way to get your kids active and involved, and for you to have be in community with other families. So again, I would think the best way is, again, just social media platforms. Go on your homeschool groups pages and just ask. I've always had very positive feedback with any questions I have. People are always willing to help.
There's actually a very large community of homeschoolers in the CSRA. There's a lot of homeschoolers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the social media, there's a Facebook group in Augusta, at least one, possibly several, homeschool group on Facebook for Augusta. There's of course Homeschooling in Aiken, which we cover all of the CSRA as well. And like Barnwell, we have some people that are Barnwell and Edgefield. I mean, a little ways out, but we try to keep information up for different things. And sometimes we'll just have people in there that aren't homeschoolers, but offer horseback riding lessons or art lessons or etc. So that's a great way to find out about what's available out there. Even things like it's like Scouts, not Awana, but there's one that's for which is it?
My son's part of Trail Life.
Okay, there's one for girls too, and it's I want to
American
colonial
Heritage.
American Heritage. Yeah. So finding out things like that, I had never even heard of that, like I said, until I met somebody on Facebook on the group who was talking about it.
Yeah. Great. All right, thanks everyone. All right, next question. How does this work for high school? Can you homeschool through high school?
I can answer that. So most colleges will accept a parent-made transcript. And so what you're just doing is putting together an educational resume that speaks to your child's abilities and accomplishments. And honestly, I would much rather do high school and keep up with just their record keeping than to teach an emergent reader how to read. I think that's harder. So I know it feels like the weight of responsibility feels really heavy when you get to high school, but that's why it helps to have somebody who can like put together your transcript and help you with that, because not know what the right way to say things are. Like for example, one of the things that people put on transcripts is they'll say that it's this science class with a lab, and there are certain sciences that are considered lab sciences, so you're like being a little bit redundant. Or you're trying to count a lab science that doesn't count as a lab science. Just because you did labs with it doesn't necessarily mean it's a lab science. Those kinds of things that you're trying to use the language that is commonly understood, but you're speaking it a little bit incorrectly. And so it helps to have somebody who can help you with that. In South Carolina, some of the associations offer transcript assistance. I do offer transcript assistance as well. If you're looking for some help with those kinds of things, it just helps to have somebody to talk it over and say, okay, what am I supposed to be saying here? And how do I pick a grade for this class? And how do I decide whether this amount of material was really a credit and that kind of thing. So, so that it speaks accurately of what your child has accomplished. So it opens the doors of opportunity. So, but yeah, I love high school. I love helping people with high school stuff. So.
Can I just add real quick that the HEA each year they put on a workshop for homeschooling through high school, and my oldest is going to be entering high school classes next year, and I took that, I guess, right before this whole virus thing happened a couple months ago, and it was very, very helpful. So for anybody who's in that situation, I would highly recommend it. It teaches you about transcripts, how to get, financial aid and scholarships and preparing for all of the, exams, how to keep records and all that kind of stuff. And it's very helpful.
Yeah, there's also another organization. I was trying to find the name of it specifically, but they also help you with transcripts, and they have graduation and things like that. I don't want to say the wrong word, but we'll add it to the blog for the links. But yeah, I think one of the things, my 15-year-old, she's been doing foreign language, and one of the things I think you just really need to figure out is, what college are they looking at, and or are they going to university, are they going to tech school, and what is that college looking for? I mean, she's, even with foreign language, the foreign language she wanted to study is not accepted by most colleges, and so she wants to continue studying it, but we need to also just make sure that we have a foreign language that's going to be accepted by most universities, you know, since she's not sure where she wants to go yet. So just kind of keeping that kind of stuff in mind, is also important. But yeah, one of something that was always told to me is learn the language of the university so you know how to write it out. So okay, next question. Can I do this and work part-time from home? Julie, do you want to speak on this?
Yeah. When I started, I was not working part-time, basically because I had little babies and it just wasn't possible. But I am coming up on 3 years that I've been working from home. And I just got to the point where my oldest kids were able to help the younger ones in the morning. A lot of people probably have heard of these companies where I'm actually teaching kids English as a second language in China. And so we're about 12 hours apart. So I can get up early in the morning and teach them. And I'm done with everything by, I get done teaching by 9 and I had to put my feedback in. So I come upstairs at around 10 and, my girls have just gotten to the point where my youngest is in kindergarten. She can't do anything by herself yet, but the older two have gotten started on their schoolwork, have gotten breakfast for the littler one. And so, I mean, it would be difficult in certain situations if you don't have an older kid who can take care of the younger ones while you're doing what you're doing. That could be problematic. But if you're at a place where you have older children that can help out, it is definitely doable. Yeah, so if your child is independent or you have other children that can help with the ones that are more dependent, then I would say yes, it's definitely something that you can do.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, homeschooling doesn't have to be from 8 to 4. I mean, you can make your time whatever works for you. And there are communities out there on online. There's blogs of lots of people who homeschool and work, and they actually share their experiences about it and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's very doable. It can be challenging, but it's definitely I know several families who the primary educator works as well as educates. So thank you, Julie. Anybody else? Okay. All right. This is going to be our last question, and then I did not look on chat. So Kim, if you are following chat, if after this question, if you'll ask any others. Okay, my child has special needs. Can I still homeschool him or her? Would anyone like to talk about this? Well, I know in Augusta, I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine just the other day. One of the things going from public education to homeschooling, one of the things I was always concerned about was, children can be tested in the public school setting, and you have those resources available. And one thing that I did find out with the CSRA is there is an organization called Partners in Achievement. They will actually test homeschoolers at no cost, which is an amazing thing, because to go to a specialist or psychologist, it can be quite expensive. So if you are finding that your child is, you're seeing different possible difficulties or anything like that, that is an organization that will test, and then they do offer different programs to help depending on your child's test results and things like that. Those no are not free, but at least it's a starting point for you. But yes, I think it's very possible. Again, homeschooling does not have to look like a brick and mortar education. It doesn't have to look like Common Core, and it just because somebody whose child is in first grade, 6 years old, and they're doing this does not mean that your child has to be doing the same thing. We have to take the comparison away, because every child is an individual, and so you work with your child and where your child's at. Anybody want to add to that?
Well, a lot of people have special needs kids and choose to homeschool because the school can't make the accommodation. I mean, they put them on an IEP plan, but they still aren't making enough accommodations to meet the needs of the child individually. And so a lot of parents choose to jump out and DIY on their own that way. And I mean, really every homeschooled child is on an individual education plan. We put them where they work. It's not like you say, well, yesterday we learned fractions, too bad you missed it, we're moving on. You keep remediating until they get it, and whatever level they're at. If they never get to fractions, some kids are, have, very special needs like that, where they maybe aren't even on a diploma track, and that still works too. So you teach them where they are and get them where they need to go so that, they're successful in life with as much success as they can be.
And I think there are programs out there, curriculums and such that also have, supplemental, even possible help as far as things that you can help if your child is dyslexia or some another special need that is keeping them from being able to learn a specific way, or just different ideas and helps that can help you. And also there's lots of support groups out there too, on social media especially. I mean, social media can really be a great thing for support with any of this. Okay. All right, so that was the end of the questions that were turned in. Is there anyone, or were there any questions for chat? I'm gonna stop sharing the screen.
I've been answering them.
Okay, do you wanna, for
Okay.
recording purposes?
Right. So one of them was asking about who keeps the public school records if they release them to you, who keeps them, that kind of thing. So I was just basically saying that a lot of times the records are what you already handed them, like your birth certificate and shot records and your power bill that proves where you live. So a lot of it's that kind of stuff, and other things that they send are sometimes like test results or report cards that are part of the permanent record, but there are things they've already given you. When you go to re-enroll though, they don't necessarily need all of that. They just usually need like a report card that helps your child get placed. I don't know.
Okay, were there any others?
And then there's one that's asking about Algebra 1. If you take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, does that go on the transcript? So I was just replying to that one. So yes, it does. It goes on the transcript. It's actually a requirement for a lot of college admissions. So you do want Algebra 1 on there. If you've got Geometry and Algebra 2, they'll be like, where's your Algebra 1? And it goes right on with either 7th or 8th grade. Public schools also, do those kinds of courses in middle school as well. And it just depends on what your college eligibility is, whether they require, a math in every high school year or not. Right now, South Carolina doesn't require that, though there was a bill that was coming through that recommended that we have an English and a math in our senior year. So, but that hasn't come through yet. So at this point, just need 4 maths. So and you can do them in middle school too, and get them done. That leaves you time to do like internships and really cool stuff that you want to do in high school still. So.
Yeah, there's so many possibilities. That's what's so fun about it. All right, are there any other questions? Did anybody else have anything they want to comment on? It's getting to be 8:30, so we've actually done really well on timing.
Thank you so much. You answered so many questions.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, like we said, we are going to, this is going to be recorded, and we're.
Well, it is recording still. You might want to stop it.
Oh yeah, let me go ahead. All right, well, thank y'all so much, and I'm so glad you attended, and I hope this helped.